Hello and welcome to our second computer side chat. This past week, we've been focusing on a few different topics. Specifically, we started out by focusing on the idea of power. What is it? What are the ways that power can be maintained or held? And then we started looking at something called the social contract theory, which basically says that a government comes about when people determine that they will give up some rights in order to obtain some form of protection. Well, now that we've come to that conclusion, that people will be willing to submit themselves under authoritative bodies such as a government, we want to talk about what is government and what does it do. So that's going to be the main focus of today's lecture. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So, our focus today is going to be on the state, government, and what their purpose is. With our essential question being, what is government and what is its purpose? So let's dive right into that. And let's start with a very simple question. What is government? Well, for our purposes, government is going to be identified as the institution through which a society makes and enforces public policy. That in and of itself brings up yet another question. What is public policy? Well, public policy are the things that government decides to do within its own borders. So we take policy and we split it into two different categories, public policy and foreign policy. Foreign policy is something that we won't really talk about until later in this year. But essentially we can boil it down to this. Public policy is the thing that a government does within its own borders. Foreign policy is the decisions and actions that government takes outside of its borders. We're really only going to worry about the public policy part right now, and seeing as how the only level of government that can practice foreign policy is the federal, public policy is a little bit more universal in its application to U.S. government. Next, let's talk about the power of government and how power is divided up. This should probably be a little bit of review for you. Power is divided in government into three sections. Legislative power, which is the power to make laws. Executive power, which is the power to enforce laws. And judicial power, which is the ability to interpret laws. Now, most governments will reside over a state. And a state is a body of people with a defined territory with the power to create and enforce laws. So when we talk about a state, generally we think of the 50 states here in the United States. That said, when we talk about the political science term state, we refer to countries as a state. In other words, the state of Ohio is considered a state. It has a defined border and territory which is managed by a state government in Ohio. But we would also call the United States, the entire country, a sovereign state as well. In other words, there's a defined territory and a body of people under which there is a government, and that government is able to make and enforce laws. Now with that in mind, let's talk about within these states, what does government do? In other words, when we say that government has power and has power to do things, what do those things look like? And we boil that down into four purposes. The first purpose is maintaining social order. This basically means that the government will ensure that those living within the community have a peaceful and safe environment within which to live. The second is providing public services. Government has to provide the things that make living within the community possible. So government will provide certain services or benefits to those that live within its territory. Third, providing national security. This is where that foreign policy part comes in. And so this means that the government will protect you from outside threats. And lastly, making economic decisions. This means that the government will control the economy. It will make decisions concerning things like money. So when we put these four purposes together, we start to realize what government does. And so think about, what does government do in order to maintain order among its people? What are some of the things that it provides to its people? What are some of the things that government does in order to protect people from threats outside of the country itself? And lastly, what are some things that the government does regarding money or the economy and the decisions in which it makes with regards to those things? All of those things go into the purpose or function of a government. So that makes up the whole of this video. It's a short one, but it's important for us to understand what is the function of a state, what is the function of a government, why do we have entities like government? That seems like a really basic question, but it's really important. If we're going to take an entire class for an entire school year about American government, we should probably understand why that entity exists. So go ahead, finish up your notes, and then proceed into writing your summary and answering the essential question. Tomorrow we'll come together, we'll take our quiz, we'll answer some questions, and then we'll go from there. Have a good night.